Welcome back to another episode of Leaders Unplugged. Today, our guest is Earnest Kim. Earnest Kim is a neuroscientist. He is currently teaching at George Fox University and has had a lot of experience in the psychological field. Please welcome to the episode, Earnest Kim.
Thank you.
And as we start this episode, we start with trying to get to know who you are and how you got into your career. So our first question for you is, what was your first job you got into your field after getting your bachelor's degree? And if not bachelor's degree, then master's or doctorate.
My first job after my bachelor's degree was probably working for a nonprofit in the Philippines. It was really far removed from the field of psychology in a way, but I did learn a lot of things there in that field. Working with people and understanding that helping people in various needs really drives you to want to learn more skills and learn more things. So I did that for off and on for about 5 years, and then I went to graduate school to get my doctorate in behavioral neuroscience and psychology.
So going to the Philippines, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Is that something you would recommend to people after getting their bachelor's?
Well, I'm not sure about the Philippines per se, but I do recommend everyone work at least for some time in some field where they are helping people actively. Because when you do help people, you begin to understand what you're good at and what you can contribute to and what kind of value you have. And like I said, it gives you great motivation to do, to have some of the goals that you have. So I think, yeah, I would recommend that to everybody.
Sweet. That's good to hear. So how did things change after you got your doctorate? Like job opportunities, the types of the jobs you can get, how did that change?
Yeah, so when I got my doctorate, actually during the process of getting my doctorate, I quickly understood that there's sort of two routes in my particular field. One, or maybe three routes. Two routes in academia. One in academia is that you're just a researcher. And what you do is you apply for grants and you do science and you investigate things, you discover things. And that is, it is, very rewarding when you do discover something, but it takes a really long time. And I never really found, I enjoyed that, but I enjoyed teaching way more. So I did a lot of teaching in graduate school, and I quickly found out that I wanted to be a teaching professor. So I decided that that was the route that I wanted to take. Now, after getting my doctorate, in order to become a teaching professor, to be competitive for these sort of tenure track positions, you have to do a postdoc. So I did some postdoc training, and that's where I went. I went from graduate school to OHSU to do some postdoc training.
Yeah, that's good. What really was the inspiration for wanting to teach? Why did you feel like you wanted to teach but not research?
Well, it's not that I didn't want to do research, it's just that my priority was teaching. And the reason is that I think my personality, I'm a more social type of person. And, doing research can be a little bit isolating at times. Like you have to do, although, you could be part of a research group to a certain degree, but I really liked the interaction and with different people. And I think, public speaking is something that I'm very comfortable with and that I like to communicate. And so these are small little things that are like, yeah, I think I can do well in this field and I enjoy it and it doesn't stress me out. That is the biggest thing. Like going in front of a classroom, if I'm prepared, doesn't stress me out, which is like some people, that gives a little bit of anxiety. So that's the kind of, I got a little indication in graduate school. And also in graduate school, I was a TA, and because of my passion for teaching, the professor gave me a lot of flexibility. So I taught sections and I really enjoyed doing those things. And in graduate school, I received some undergraduate teaching reward that also reinforced my, oh, maybe I'm good at this and I like this. And so these are all kind of small clues in my history that made me to think that, oh yeah, this is something that I can do and be good at.
Huh, that's interesting about like the public speaking, how you're comfortable with it. Did that come naturally or did it come as like learning things? Because I feel like public speaking at least is a big like fear people have to get over.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So it happened really early on. And I don't know if this is serendipitous, but when I was growing up, I went to a small church. And in this small church, they didn't have a pastor. So very early on, they would ask, even though we'd be in high school, they'd ask you to speak and or be in front of the church. And you know, the church was small; it was maybe like less than 20 people. But during that time, I learned how to, you know, speak publicly, I guess. And it was really a rewarding experience. It was of course, I was very anxious then, but getting into the Bible and, you know, trying to figure out in, you know, maybe high school years, trying to find out something that is relevant, applicable, inspirational, like, and then organizing your talk in a way that makes sense. And so that I've had a lot of those experiences in high school. Now, this is before I knew that I wanted to become a teaching professor. So, but doing that thing really, I think, prepared me in a certain extent. And I studied, and I was always fascinated by good public speakers, orators. Like I was really interested, like listening to. I'd go to the library and I would rent a tape of like Martin Luther King Jr. and his speeches. And like, I really like listening to Barack Obama speeches, like truly inspirational speeches. And they were different. Like, I didn't know exactly at that time why they were different, but the way that they carried themselves, the way they just walked the room, the way that it wasn't later till I was in the Philippines and I was working with this pastor and he was a great public speaker. And so I would just like watch him, like what he did. And he told me a little bit about what he did, which is like he would walk around and he would, instead of speaking to a crowd, he would pick one person in that crowd and he would just lock eyes on that individual and he would just speak to that individual, which is crazy that you would think that only that individual would get that message. But by speaking personally in that way, it really you connected, like it connected in a way that is kind of, I don't know, it's unexplainable. And it's really a powerful thing, like powerful change could happen in that moment. And you can look at like, Tony Robbins, right? He's in sort of in the secular side, but he's like our modern day secular preacher, right? He inspires millions of people. And why do people gravitate toward him? I think it's because he's really honed his craft of in that setting to be inspirational, which is, I think, something that is really hard to find these days. It's really hard to find inspiration. And when people find it, they're like, that is a really big source of motivation.
right, yeah. No, that's partially a reason why Devin and we started this podcast was to motivate people. Honestly, probably the main reason is just to find inspiration for kids our age and insight and advice for going into these fields, because I have personally quite a few friends that they just don't know what they want to do.
Right.
And it's just a matter of figuring out
Right.
what they want to do.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. Through your podcast, people are probably gravitated toward that because through the speakers that you invite, they get inspired. They're like, that's so inspiration is, I feel like, my teaching philosophy. Like, it's not my job. Knowledge is arguably not important anymore because it's so accessible and free. It's to inspire that individual to go out and be passionate about that said thing. Because honestly, when I look at my college and I graduated with a degree in chemistry, like how much did I actually retain? Like how much do I actually use? And you know, some people use it like a lot. I don't use too much of my degree. I use it some because of my understanding of chemistry and things, but really it's about like the inspiration is the seed of this motivation, behavioral change, and to look at the world a little bit different.
Yeah, so about being a chemistry major in
Yeah.
college, what was the shift of wanting to go from a chemistry major and start focusing in on neuroscience?
Yeah, I didn't get that until after I had my experience in the Philippines. I knew I needed to go to graduate school, and I thought it was going to be in chemistry. But I took a class at a community college called biopsychology, actually. And when I went there, I was like, I didn't even know this field existed. It was just amazing. This is exactly what I wanted. And before I was a chemistry major, I actually was a religion philosophy major. And that religion philosophy major was not about the study of religion per se, it was a study of why people believe what they believe. And so belief systems, the psychology of belief systems, was always on my radar as something that was so important to me. And it just so happens that that is my area of focus now. Like to find and to understand the neurobiology of when we believe something is going to happen. That is a focus of mine and something that I'm really interested in now in the field of psychology, of course.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for a student in college taking, whether it be chemistry classes or like me taking psychology classes, what type of classes would you recommend someone take for just future jobs or just general classes that are good?
Yeah. So I think we're living in a climate where, again, knowledge is not very valuable in the world. Not, sorry, let me clarify. Semantic knowledge, like you can just type into Google and figure out how to do things, and people, or go to a YouTube video and figure out how to do things. This has democratized a lot of like a certain kind of knowledge. The thing that I think moving forward is the application of that knowledge, and the application of that knowledge that has utility in the marketplace. Okay? It's not just application for application, it's application of that knowledge for some purpose. And I have this in my, I don't know if the camera can see this, but I have this poster in my office because this, I always am reminded of like, what are the important things? Like here, this is like stages of learning. And if you can recall facts and basic concepts and remember those things, then that's like the very bottom. If you can understand them and apply them, you're moving up. But the highest, the top of that pyramid is to actually create. The thing about it is we are made to create things, like make things better, and creating things will always have some value in the marketplace. Like that's the thing. So here, what I would recommend to your listeners and to you is to find a passion that you have, to be inspired by a particular field, and within that field, acquire skills so that you can create something that will then help somebody in society. If you create things that will help somebody in society, that inherently will be of great value, and you will be compensated well, and you'll feel good about yourself.
That's really good. I'm feeling inspired just listening to that.
Yeah.
It's working. So yeah, for if someone wanted to work in teaching, let's say, or even research, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, so those are two different skill sets, I would have to say. But teaching is, you really have to find ways to communicate. I think communication is really important, um, because a lot of people, there's a lot of people when I go into the classroom, like I'll go into the classroom today, right? And I'll see that maybe half of them will be kind of listening, like they're just kind of like there, like, and some of them are there just to pass the class, and some of them are there just maybe they're interested a little bit, But your job as an educator and as a teacher is to communicate this thing that you're passionate about and show the students that what I'm talking about has great application. It just so happens that my field that I'm in is in biopsychology and neuroscience, and the things that I'm trying to show you, if you understand them, then it has great value. And um, so, as from a teaching perspective, I would have to say to look at something and to look and to be able to communicate that topic in a way that can inspire that individual, number one, and or give them skills in that field. So I have different classes. In my biopsych class, it's a knowledge-based class. That's where like inspiration happens. It's difficult. I'm told that students tell me it's very difficult, and but in my higher level biopsych class, in my neuroscience class, we actually just do experiments. We do hands-on skills. We do surgeries. We learn about anesthesia. We learn about behavior. We learn about statistics. We learn about, the hard skills of a neuroscientist. So that's different, right? That's applying those knowledge that I've given in biopsych and in a higher level neuroscience class to be able to apply those skills in a real world way. Now, what does this, how is this skill relevant in the marketplace? And I'd have to say, like, as a teacher, of course, you wanted to flesh out those ideas, but as a researcher, the skills are to try to, I think the biggest skill as a researcher these days is in data analytics, and being comfortable with data, because the tools that are coming out for researchers these days are remarkable, I just learned, I just listened to a talk by um, the guy who started the what is it called, Deep Mind at Google, which is the artificial intelligence group, and they were they were bought by Google. But that guy, he did his PhD at Cambridge, and he was actually he loved games, and he started, like, he was like a chess champion, and he made this early on. He saw the value of programming things and to make an artificially intelligent program that was able to be good at games. But eventually he first started with trying to make an artificially intelligent program that beat the best player in AlphaGo. A program, AlphaGo is a really, really, like, there's so many different combinations that you can have, so many different states that you can have, and nobody was able to do this until he had this learning reinforcement algorithm that he made at DeepSeek. Anyway, so he does this thing, and you're like, big deal. Like, you made this program that is now able to beat the best person in AlphaGo, whatever. But he used those principles to make, and this is the crazy thing, he then made, there was this thing where there was this prize, and $1 million prize, where people didn't know, like, you have amino acids are the individual um, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, and they didn't know how amino acids can fold into a three-dimensional protein, the basic building blocks of like life. And there was this competition where every year people tried to predict based on an amino acid, a linear amino. They told you all the amino acids in the sequence. What is that 3D conformation going to be like? And in order to actually prove what this structure looked like, you had to do what's called an X-ray crystallography. This gets into chemistry. This is some of my field, but like you would take like years to actually get the three-dimensional shape of this protein. Well, based on his work from AlphaGo, he made a program where he can now solve from the amino acids the exact three-dimensional shape, and he called that AlphaFold. And he made this free for everybody. Now, biological researchers, chemists, all of them can go online, type in this amino acid sequence, and get a 3D representation of what it's going to look like. He got a Nobel Prize for this work. This is transformative. This saves 4 years of work and dwindles it down to milliseconds that you can do. This technology is incredible. And so the way that machine learning and technology is like improving now, it's changing like every day. It's changing. Every year it's changing. And technology can be a little bit scary, but I can do it without getting a PhD. I can go get an amino acid sequence, put it into this AlphaFold, and boom, look at three-dimensional structure. And this is not possible before. Now, a person with no coding knowledge, basically very little, can go into Google Colabs, type in something, boom, and the code comes out. You can ask ChatGPT, like, how do I code this thing? Boom, it'll tell you that code. So it democratizes. Technology is able, like, everyone can have like superpowers to a certain extent to do some crazy things. But now with the advent of machine learning, natural language processing, you can now have an assistant, an AI assistant that you can use to create things in ways that are so powerful and so effective. And this is a little bit scary when you think about it in another way, but I think if you use it in a right way, if you use it to, again, to help people solve something, then it not only improves society, but it also, you'll have value there. People will come to you and people will pay you for that service.
It's interesting how technology is becoming such an important centerpiece of our society. So, with college students and people coming into the workforce, what is one thing that you think is missing from the workforce? Or is there something missing from the workforce that college students could learn and perhaps learn a skill to bring to the workforce?
I will tell every single person, whatever field you are in, that you have to incorporate technology into your skill. Unless you're a classical violinist going to Juilliard and playing classical music, or a painter, like unless you're highly skilled, you're like 6'6" and you're built to be an athletic person, right? And even then, using technology to make your body stronger and better would be, I think, incorporating technology into your skill is going to differentiate you. Why? Because the workforce, it's too rapid for the workforce. The workforce right now in the marketplace, they didn't grow up with that. So the programs that you guys are being introduced to are not familiar to the older workforce. Like, take for example, like Canva. Like probably professors that are older are not really familiar with Canva. Like statistics programs now, they're really affordable now. You can start, like, every couple months there's a new program out there. some new technology. Back in the day, I used to do things by hand a lot, like just calculating things. And, now I can do things very quickly using Python, using, there's new emergent technologies coming out like every day. And they're not being taught that much in the school because it's even fast for us, but um, I would embrace those technologies and try to figure out what kind of value they have in the marketplace. Like, what is this used for, basically, and how do you use it?
Mm. Yeah, that's good. Learning and especially like what jobs want and like how it's gonna play out and everything.
Jobs are going to change so much with robotics, with machine learning. Like, it's not that jobs are going to disappear. That's what people think. It's not that, well, certain jobs will disappear, but new jobs will be created. New jobs. And those jobs have to deal with an understanding of technology. It is the world that we live in now. Yeah. Unless we break out into World War, we don't. Unless that happens.
Right. Yeah.
And technology kaput.
Right.
But just even in war. Look at the war. It's been tragic, the war between Russia and Ukraine now, and all those pieces, but that has fundamentally changed the landscape of and nature of war. If I don't know if you've been following that, or your listeners might know this, but all the traditional aspects of war, like tanks and guns and all this stuff, man, those have been really taking a hit. And it's like drone warfare, artificial warfare. It's like these drone capabilities, these small little planes that can just go into the enemy's area. And it's scary that the technology is now, for example, before it was about how many like huge planes you had and how big your army was. But now, like, countries that are wealthy, like for example Singapore, can have a very powerful army because they don't need the army per se. They have technology. You see what I mean? It's like the geopolitical landscape is changing now. It's not like hard. You still need planes and ships and all that, but it's like now the resource allocation for warfare is now changing because of that war, because of technology. Mm-hmm. And someone like Ukraine, which would have fallen like that to Russia, who has way superior airplanes, they would have fallen a long time ago if not for the technology and also the U.S. support, actually. Yeah.
That's interesting to think about how like technology changes the entire dynamic of a war.
Yes, it does. It has. And like, that's why people in the U.S. government are like, we need to stop building these billion-dollar planes, because yes, we might build like 10 of them, but let's put a lot of our resources into this other kind of technology.
Yeah, interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Huh. As far as personality goes for people wanting to pursue a degree in psychology or neuroscience, what are some personality traits that you think are the most helpful?
Yeah. I think you have to have a fascination of like why this person does this thing. Like, you have to have a curiosity for human behavior. I think that's like, you can't be like, that person is like, ew, why is that person acting that way? Like, like be judgmental. Just be like, I wonder why that person is acting that way. If someone is, does something to you that, they might like, call you names, or they might give you some colorful language. They might behave in a certain way that normally could be interpreted as hurtful. But then in another sense, if you didn't do anything to instigate that, then you're just like, what's going on? That non-judgmental, not understanding of like, what's going on in that person? What happened to that individual? What trauma did they have? What pain did they have? What did they encounter that morning? What is their personality? Did they grow up, developmentally speaking? Like, did they grow up and their parents were like that to them, right? All these questions come to mind. And I think as a psychologist, as someone who's interested in psychology, that's what you think about. And you try to understand human behavior in that lens.
Personally, for example, I think that same way. I've learned that just taking an interest in psychology, that like it's so important to observe people
Yeah.
and how they act. And the one thing that interested me in psychology that really got me hooked on it is like behavior,
Yeah.
how people interact, but also there's this one video I stumbled upon by Jordan Peterson. We
Yeah.
were talking about him before this video, but he went over. It's called the dark tetrad of personality traits. I was like, this is very interesting, and
Yeah.
it's psychopathy and narcissism, Machiavellianism. But it turns out if you're all three of those, you're a sadist, and so you enjoy pleasure in people's harm. And I was really interested in psychopathy, and I saw this video of a different lecture of Jordan Peterson, but he mentioned how he thinks psychopathy is a myth. And I was like, what do you mean psychopathy is a myth? It's like diagnosable. And he said that people who are psychopaths are just low in conscientiousness, meaning they're parasitic, and they're low in agreeableness, meaning everything's out for them, and they don't care about your feelings, and they can mooch off of you, which I thought was very interesting, just like how that can just happen to someone.
Yeah. It's a we live in a world where there's not good people. And people encounter hurt and pain and trauma from other people. And in one sense that's a sad thing, and in another sense this is why the branch of psychology is there to, I think, in a noble way, you can help those individuals that have been impacted by the world in such manner, and help them to look at the world and to not see the world in that light. It's really, really easy when you bump into a dark person for that darkness to influence how you look at the world, how much light that there's in the world. And it takes a lot of, I think it takes a lot of hope and faith to be able to continue to shine in a bright way despite the darkness around you. I mean, that's what Jesus said. Like Jesus said, to be a light in dark places. Like light is not so bright when it's sunny outside, but a light truly is bright, and it's truly, it's something about it. I don't know, like on Fridays, me and my family, we gather around, we turn off all the lights, and we put on 3 candles, and we talk about our week. We talk about, the struggles, the challenges that we had, the successes that we had as a family. And my kids are only like 5 and 8 right now, but in that moment when that light comes on, they enjoy it. We're all brought to a certain space of peace, of contemplation. And I think a lot of people in this world are looking for that light in their dark spaces.
Yeah. Success. That's interesting. I want to talk about that for a second. So, what is one lesson that you've learned from success that you've carried through your life now? But also, what is one failure that you've learned a lesson from?
Yeah. In my mind, those two are related. And let me tell you why. Success, in my mind, is when you believe in something despite failure. You believe in still the same outcome, even though you cannot see its success in that moment. The reason I say that is because, I have an experiment, well known, and I've done this experiment myself, and with 2 rats. One rat is you teach the rat, you say, hey, rat, press a lever one time. Press a lever one time, and you get 1 pellet. So he presses a lever one time, gets 1 pellet. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And he learns that. And then later, I do something a little bit cruel, and I disconnect the pellet dispenser. And so when he presses it, no pellet comes out. And he's like, nothing, nothing, nothing. And then he's like, why am I pressing? Because I've learned that when you press it once, that's the rules. You press it once and you don't get it, then you're never going to get it. That's his thinking. And so what he learns is he learns to extinguish his responses very quickly. I train another rat where when he presses it, there's a random timer goes off, and he doesn't know when he's going to get that pellet. He presses it. Sometimes it comes. Sometimes it doesn't. Pressing. He's like, ugh. And then later, I disconnect the pellet dispenser again. He presses it, and he's like, oh, this is just one of those times where I've learned that I just keep pressing because I have learned to keep being persistent despite failure. That's what I've learned. I've learned grit. I've learned resilience because I've learned to hope. That's a definition of hope, by the way. And that's a definition of faith in my mind, which is you believe in an outcome despite not seeing that outcome. It's not faith to say that your pants are, tan colored because I see them and we both agree that. If I didn't see you and I say, Jackson's probably wearing tan pants. And then I'd be like, that's sort of faith because I don't see you. So hope and faith is this exercise of psychology. It's a belief system that you believe in an outcome that actually hasn't happened yet. So that, in fact, it's like you receiving a test and you received a failing grade. And some people will say, I've never received a failing grade. And then they judge themselves and say, I'm not good at this. And then they give up. And other people have said they receive a failure grade and they said, I've received a failing grade before, but I've worked hard and I've been successful. So everything in my life that I consider successful, that I've been successful at, has been with some failure that I've experienced. And I've persisted despite that failure. And that is what has brought me here in this moment.
Interesting. Because it's interesting. We ask this question to every guest that we have, and it's interesting to see people's different responses to that question because I think you're the first person that we've interviewed so far that has said it's a combination of both. Mm-hmm. Some have said it's like success, don't learn from it, but failure you do. Yeah. Some say the opposite. Yeah. And so it's interesting that it's a combination.
Well, to me, I don't know. Yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah. That's good. What is a day in the life of your job as a teacher?
Yeah. So depending on which day, but if I were to combine them into some average day, then I get here in the morning. I get here a couple hours before my classes, and I'm preparing for those classes. I'm like looking over my notes again, make sure this makes sense, and just the plan. Even though I have the materials, I want to make sure that, I'm just preparing. I'm preparing. And those are some of my knowledge-based classes, I guess, like lecture and try to come up with activities and things that I can incorporate, try to find ways to not just to get them to remember, but to apply, to evaluate, to create, and to think about those things, Bloom's taxonomy. And the other thing is I have lab classes, and so preparing the materials for those lab classes, making sure the students have all the materials that they need. I'm preparing a lot for for the classes. And then at the end of the day, usually I'll go over to my rat lab and make sure that the rats are doing okay. And, I have students that are working there, but just to make sure that everything is fine. And then the third thing that I do is I'm always like looking. So I have a couple Richter students this summer and preparing for the summer, preparing for all the research questions that I want to do, all the plans that I want to have. And so that's kind of third tier. Yeah, first tier, focus on my classes, getting the materials ready. Second tier, like how am I going to incorporate the material into some way that makes sense, and that's inspiring, and and then thinking about the future in the summer, those kinds of things.
That's good. So as we kind of wrap up this episode, out of everything that's been said, everything that's been talked about, what is one key takeaway, or if someone were just to take away one point from this conversation, what would that be?
I think inspiration. It has to be inspiration. I mean, it's the thing that you need to do anything. It's like the difference between the person being like, oh, that's a nice thing that he said, and then go about their life in the same way, right? Inspiration says, I'm changed by this thing, and now I'm going to pursue this thing different. I'm going to do this thing, and then I'm going to do this thing and this thing. And so the difference, inspirational change, is the change that is going to make things different in your life. You're going to do things differently. So I would say that if you're inspired in any way with any idea, there might be a lot of people here listening with different individual circumstances, different things going on in their life. But if there was a thought in their mind that came to them, I would recommend that they grab onto it and then do something about it and see what happens. See what happens. And if nothing happens, nothing happens. But that's the steps that you need. Like, I want to do this with my life, or I want to pursue this. Then go do something about it and see what that outcome is.
That's great to hear. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this episode. This is great, and hopefully the audience, they learned something new today and covered a lot of topics: education, neuroscience, technology in general. So thank you for having us on that
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
Right.
And with that being said, thank you for listening to the podcast, enjoying another episode of Leaders Unplugged.